Hi, welcome back to part 2 of our video series for transitioning to Angular 2.0. Today what we're going to do is we are going to refactor our project that we created in step 1, and we're going to create our first component-based directive. So before we do this though, we're going to go ahead and refactor some of the existing code, and we're going to go ahead and move our dashboard and our admin into the app folder. We're going to create a new folder here called features. We like to go ahead and separate our feature pages and put them into a folder so that they're not cluttering up the rest of the app. So in our case here, I'm just going to grab this guy, pull him into there. Great. And same with admin. All right, great. So now with that, we also want to create a module. So right now, if we look at our app module, it's referencing admin and dashboard directly. And we really don't want that. We want to have our app module be cleaner and it only deal with top level components. So we'll be changing this out to be app.features. Well, the only problem with that is we don't have an app features yet. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and create it. Alright, so I'm going to create a new JavaScript file inside of the features folder called features.module.js. Great. So now the first thing that I'm going to do here is we want to use an IFI. So this prevents us from accidentally contaminating the global namespace. So great, there's an IFI, fantastic. So now we're going to just add our usedirect, and we are going to go ahead and declare a new module, angular.module app.features. Great. Don't forget to go ahead and add the braces there, or the square brackets, so that we're declaring this as a new one, not as an existing one. Alright, great. So now we have our features module. So now when we look at this here, we have our features here, we have our features module. Now let's go back and look at our deal. Uh-oh, we've broken something. So often what happens with a hot towel project is when we make major changes like this, NodeMon and this whole GOAT process doesn't pick up all the changes, and so we just need to restart it. Let's see if that doesn't fix it for us. Well, now we have some problems here. That we're on a 404, we're not found. Alright, great. So let's see here. We're going to go ahead and start refactoring some of this. Now part of the problem I know with this is that in our route we have our template URL, and unfortunately we have moved, so that template URL is no longer valid. So let's go ahead and change this on both spots. Great. And hey, ta-da, we're back. So notice I didn't have to refresh. It automatically picked up my changes and we're back in business. So that's the first step. Now, part of the problem here is we're in our module here. However, we're still under module app admin. Well, that would be okay, except for as we add 50 pages to this project, this is going to get very cumbersome to find all of these and manage them. So what I would rather do is go ahead and change that there. So we're going to go ahead and make these part of the features, and now we're going to have to go change this in a few spots. So there's that. We're going to have to go find it in our spec here. And great. So quite a few changes to get this all up and running. Oh, we're going to need to add it here and here. So that was just the admin one. Now let's go ahead and repeat this for the dashboard. So again, since we're changing the structure here, we're going to go ahead, going to have to make these changes and just bite the bullet and get it done right now so that all this code will work. The great news is that we have tests that we can run and validate that we have all of this done correctly and that it will run properly. So let's go ahead and change that there and there. Okay, we're good. And on the route spec. So that's where it's expecting that from, and excellent. So now we come back over and we're broke again. Uh-oh, what happened? Well, it's actually pretty simple. We don't have any modules loaded anymore. What do you mean by that? Well, what's happened here before our modules were declared in here for admin and dashboard. We need to move those out and place them into the features. So, however, this is still not right because they are no longer directly under app. They are in app features. So great, refresh, and look, we're back. So what's really interesting about this is that we can add and remove. Let's go ahead and take that off. Let's see here. I can add and remove features just by removing the module. So we'll go ahead and put that back in, and it refreshes, and oh, well, we're still on the 404 page. So if we go ahead and switch that, great, now we're back. So in our case here, this would allow us to be able to bring in and out of features of the application just by adding and removing them from the modules. Great, so now we've got our features refactored. We've got our admin and our dashboard page in there now, and everything's still working. So now our next level is we're going to create a new directory called components. Now we like to create a directory called components to place all of our directives that have HTML templates with them and place them in the components directory. So, and then also with this, we want to create another folder. What we're going to do here, I'll just go ahead and create the folder. I want to call it people. And what I want to look at here is I want to take what we have right here and make this a reusable component. Let's say the company that we're working for decides that they want to make this a reusable component and we want to have it on 3 or 4 pages. Now we could easily copy the code from page to page to page and make that work. However, that's a really bad practice. So let's go ahead and refactor this out and create our first directive-based component. All right. So first we're going to go ahead and create a couple of files in our people component directory. And oh, didn't want a TypeScript file. I want just a JavaScript file. And the first one I want is people.directive.js. Great. And I'm just going to copy this guy. All right. Oh, I want to do that. There we go. Paste them again. And I want a people dot. Oh, that was interesting. .html. I can change the file type on the fly. And the last one I want here is a module. Great. So, oh, the one other thing that I almost forgot is I want to create a components.module.js. Great. So we want to go ahead and, just like what we did in features, we want to create a components module. So this component module, again, is going to use an IFI. And if you're wondering why we're doing this and you want more details on it, please go look at John Papa's style guide. He covers this in detail, covers all the different reasons of why you want to do this and the benefits of it. So, strict, great, Angular module, and we want this to be app.components. And all right, now we already know that the first module that we want to require in is going, and we haven't created this yet. However, we'll go ahead and add this in here. We know that we're going to want our people component. And so we go ahead and add that module in there. It'll automatically load it. Oh, we've got a little mistake there. Great. Thank you, WebStorm, for pointing that out to me. All right, fantastic. So now we've got our components module. I'm actually just going to copy what we have here, and I'm going to paste it into the people module, just in the interest of saving a little bit of time. And here, oh, I think we're missing one other thing here. Just need a semicolon. So let's go back over and fix that one. And let's go back over, we also created this one. No, got that one right. Okay, excellent. So now we have our people module. It's part of components. The components module loads it. Oh, we forgot. We need to go over to app module. So now we got core, widgets, features. Hey, we need components. So let's go ahead and add that in. So otherwise what will happen is that our index HTML here, I think we should see already that it may not be in there yet since we didn't add it to the module. However, at some point this will pick up that change and add our code in there. I don't know when it mysteriously happens. We actually may need to Control-C, go ahead and exit this out and reserve it up again. Great. So let's see if it actually added. Oh, look here. So there's our components module, and here is our people module. I didn't have to do anything. It automatically added those to the project for me. So absolutely fantastic. All right. So let's go ahead and write up our people directive. So again, we're going to use an IFE. Great, we got that. And now we are going to create our directive. And so we're going to use our existing module, components, people, and now we're going to declare a directive. And we're just going to call it people. And now often what you'd see is we'd go ahead and use square brackets, we'd define our dependencies, and then we would then pass in the function for this. Well, we want to modularize this code as well a little bit and keep this a little more simple. So in this case here, I'm just going to type in people directive. Now, we don't have a people directive yet. That's okay. We're going to. Copy that. And the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to have a named function called people directive. And now these two match. Great. Why do we do this? Well, best practices tell you, and again, this is something you could read on John Papa's. This is something that we also have found on our own, that using named functions, things just work better. Why? Well, let's see if we've got multiple functions in our file here. The problem is that context can change. So now we have to start using stuff like var self equals this, and now self dot call some other action. This becomes monotonous and difficult. So instead, if we just use named functions, I can just call this function, assuming again it's down here. I can just call it just by the name, and I don't have to worry about context and whatnot. So that's why we've moved towards it. If you look at John Papa's guide, you can also find some other reasons that he'll talk about why that's a best practice. All right. So now what we need to do is, since we have our people directive, we need to return what defines the directive. So here's the definition. Since this is a component-based directive, and it has its own template, we want to restrict it to element based. So we'll go ahead and use E there. I want to go ahead and give it its template URL, and that's going to look like app components people people.html. All right, and we're going to go ahead and add our isolated scope. Now in this case here, this is a little premature. However, we're going to need it for later, so I'm just going to add it now. By putting this in here, this is going to isolate the scope from the parent and allows us at a later point where we can actually pass in stuff to our directive to use later. Controller, we're going to, well, we don't have anything called people controller, and notice also people is capitalized. There's some reasons for that, and we'll cover that in a second. Controller as, we want to use a controller as syntax so that we can get rid of scope. Scope is going away. Controllers are going away. So we want to do everything that we can to prepare for Angular 2.0, because when those go away in 2.0, we're not going to have them, and we need to be used to already being away from them. Now, as you know, with our dashboard and our admin features, they have controllers, and we're not going to be able to get rid of those controllers quite yet. So what we are going to do, though, is make them as thin as possible so that when they do go away, we don't have as big of a refactor to handle. All right, so now we're going to add bind to controller as true. What this says is that anything that we pass in on the isolated scope will automatically get bound to VM. VM also stands for view model. We want that so that we don't have to take the extra step to bind each one of those items from VM scope to just VM dot whatever. So that'll save us time later. All right, again, I'm going to create another named function called people controller. Now, we do this as people controller with a capital P so that the linter does not come back and say that this is an invalid format. I don't remember what the exact error is. However, by doing it this way, it sees it as a constructor, and because it's a constructor, it allows us to do this and not complain about it. So if you want to find out what it does otherwise, go ahead and use a lowercase p, change it up here as well, and when the linter runs, you'll see that you'll actually be getting an error regarding this, and that the best way to handle this is to use a capital. All right, so in our controller here, this is where we're actually going to start moving our functionality from dashboard over to here. However, one of the other things that we're going to want to do, and you have a couple different options here. You could use ng-inject, or in our case here, we're just going to use $inject for the purpose of this demo. However, you could do it either way, and maybe in one of the later demos we'll show how to do it the other way as well. So the one thing that we know we need is data service. This is where all the data is coming from. And I want to bring this in, have it injected into the people controller, and this is what we're using to mock the data and simulate that it's coming from a database. So let's see, we're also going to go ahead and add var VM equals this. Why do we need this? Well, the idea here is that we want to have a view model in our controller that also maps to the view model that's going to be used in our HTML. That way we don't get confused. We could call this anything. We could call it Bob. We could call it controller. You know, I've seen all sorts of stuff. We prefer to go ahead and just call it VM, so that the same VM that we're thinking about in the controller for this directive is the same VM that we're using in the HTML. Helps us keep things straight. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to look at our dashboard controller and say, what do we need from here? What can we refactor out of here and pull over to the other side? Well, the first thing that we could use is get people. Let's just go ahead and remove this function. This is going to cause some other stuff to break. However, it's a starting point. We're going to pull this over and place it here. And also, we're not going to need this people array anymore. We'll just add it over here. All right. And now the problem is that we have this promise that once it resolves, we want to have this logger info say that the dashboard's active. That's great. We can still do that. However, we're going to need to remove get people. That will no longer be part of that. And the only thing that we'll have is just get message count. And when that one resolves, it'll go ahead and display that message. I believe everything else that's in here can stay in here and that we're good to go. Excellent. So coming back over to our people directive, now what we have is a directive that is defined. It has a controller that is encapsulated, and this controller is exposing people onto the view model. So this would be available, vm.people would be available to the, would be available in the HTML to be able to use. And so as you can see here, so let's just change this. I like to have my thens on the second line. You may like it differently. That's okay. Great. Cut and paste that to reformat it. All right, so that looks like what I want. In our case here, we're going to get data back. We're going to then set that data to our view model, people, object, and then for whatever reason, it's also returning this. I believe that's so that if something was calling this directly, which it was before, yes. So before it was being called by the, it's being handled here with these promises. So we needed to go ahead and return that so when it resolved, it would get the data, whatnot. So, all right. So realistically, we actually don't need that anymore. And we don't even really need the return here. So, because we're not having get people actually return a promise to anybody. All we really want is just the data. All right, great. So I believe we have everything there. Now the only problem is we don't have any HTML. Okay, so let's go look at the dashboard HTML. And we can see right here, first name, last name, age. All right, so this is our component. And all right, so now we're just going to go ahead and grab the whole thing, the header and everything, and go ahead and pull this out of here. And now when we come over here, oh, it's gone. Okay, so let's come back over to WebStorm and let's go ahead and paste this guy in. All right, now let's go look at our page. It's still gone. Oh yeah, we need to go ahead and add our directive to the dashboard. So now we're going to add that. Oh, well, we don't have any data. It's rendering, however, there's no data. Well, why is that? Well, it's because we're not actually calling. Let's go find our people directive. We're not actually calling the getPeople method. Now, one technique that we could use here is we could go ahead and just call getPeople directly. However, this can be a bad technique because of testing. What happens here is before we can get the controller all set up and get everything mocked, potentially, that this fires before the test actually can run and spy on it and whatnot. So this is an okay technique. However, not ideal. So our preference actually is we'll go ahead and expose this method like so onto the view model. And in that way we can get to it from the view model. Now, there's also a couple other little things that we're going to have to fix. However, let's go ahead and I'm going to place it here on the table. That's closest. And as we refactor this, I don't want to forget about it later. vm.getPeople. All right, great. Let's go look at our template here. Oh, there's our data. All right. So as you can see, here's our repeat. It's using view model from before. Here's our people. Our ng and init is actually calling our directive. And ta-da, we get our data. So what we've learned so far is how to go ahead and refactor out our widget, a reusable component that we can then use over and over again. We could add another one. So if we want to go ahead on the dashboard here, if we wanted to add another row and Great. We could do so. And now we've got 2 people. So we've got a reusable component, and we are able to do so very easily and without breaking the existing application. All right, great. So this is everything for this video, for this lesson. Stay tuned for step 3, video 3 on this, and what we're going to do is create a news directive, very much like how we're doing this one, and help reinforce the techniques that we just learned. All right, thank you. Have a good day.